what does Los Angeles mean to me? I've always thought that LA is a place where dreams come true.
Los Angeles is like an amazing city.
It's not just a tourist destination for me, it's also home.
Hi, my name is Sophie Janinet, and you're listening to LA Portraits. If I were to ask you to close your eyes and think about LA, what would you see? The beach? The Hollywood sign? Lots of palm trees? Maybe you would also visualize the silhouette of the buildings standing out against the mountains in the background. Yes, I'm referring to downtown, the very heart of the city, and yet not necessarily the one with the warmest appeal to it. To explore it, I turned to someone who loves the city and its history.
Very old building. I love old buildings, and I love preserving the history of LA, and it's just gorgeous. And they do a lot of filming, especially out here in the front.
Meet Rosalinda Morales, our guest of this episode. Being born in the area, she really knows downtown like the back of her hand. And that's where we went together on a crisp but sunny winter morning after she picked me up on the way.
Good morning.
Together, we headed to the crossroads of Hope and First Street, which is not just an intersection name that will make you smile if you pause to reflect on it. It's also a meaningful place to Rosalinda, especially the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power building. That takes her straight to memory lane.
All of this be built when I was a child. Oftentimes my parents and I would come out here and walk around, kind of like a family gathering. I live on the other side of where this building is, and from my backyard I can actually see this building. And before they built some other buildings around, I remember in the summertime I could open my bedroom window and it was all lit up, so it would light up my whole backyard. It was kind of really cool.
Although everyone who has ever visited Los Angeles came downtown at least to see the last bookstore and eat at Grand Central Market, it is not necessarily the most appealing place to hang out nowadays. Many people will recommend not to walk alone in some parts of it at night. That's not at all where Rosalinda lives, though.
People never think that when people ask me, where do you live? And I say downtown LA, and their first reaction is, oh, do you live in a loft? Do you live in a building, a high-rise building? And I'm like, no, I live in a real neighborhood with cars and people and dogs and cats and a backyard. So, but that is the perception, especially of non-Angelenos that have people that are from other areas, because they don't see the neighborhoods. They don't know what it's been like here for those of us that have grown up here. Because it's history. I mean, I've seen it be built. I've lived here my whole life. This is, technically, I feel like I'm in my backyard, which I am, kind of. I'm like a 5-minute walk from here. So.
I love this analogy that goes to show how familiar the area is to her, starting with the real reason she chose to take us here.
We're also across from the Music Center, which is beautiful, and it has been renovated recently, and we'll go across over there and I'll show you some places.
Where we are heading now is all about entertainment and arts, but has nothing to do with Hollywood. The Music Center is the place to come and see live performances, and Rosalinda is the perfect guide to give us a tour.
Okay, so now we're coming into the plaza in the Music Center. To our right is the very beautiful Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. It's got these amazing chandeliers. I highly recommend catching an opera there. To our left is the Mark Taper Forum. That is a theater in the round. It's the smallest of the 3 theaters here. It is LA's only performing arts destination. This area is, I guess, LA's version of Broadway, but much smaller, of course. There are many shows that have originated here that then go to Broadway and then they come back.
I had already been here many times, but being with Rosalinda allowed me to see it differently, paying more attention to the plaza and its surroundings. For example, I had never noticed before what appears to be a church close by.
But we are now approaching the front of the Amundsen Theater. So we also have a fantastic view of the mountains from here, which is very nice. That's a nice frame there. And again, now we can see all of the cathedral to our right. That's a Los Angeles Cathedral. Look at that. We have a perfect view right there of the bell tower, which is really beautiful, facing Grand Street. And when they do ring the bells, you do hear them. So what a lot of people don't know is there is a mausoleum in the basement. And they have celebrities that are there. Gregory Peck was one of the first celebrities that was entombed there.
Between you and me, I had no idea who Gregory Peck was. And I was too ashamed to admit it to Rosalinda. So as soon as I got home after the interview, I went to the World Wide Web to check him out. And now that I did, I cannot resist sharing my findings with you. Usually I try not to digress too much, but I feel like he really deserves a shout out, in case you don't know him. And if you already do, I'm sure you agree. You see, once upon a time in Hollywood, Gregory Peck was the biggest movie star out there, with a 60 years long career and many rewards, including the Oscar for the role of Atticus Finch in the classic movie To Kill the Mockingbird. In 1953, while he was at the very top of his game, he worked on a movie with an actress who had been cast for the first time. He was so impressed by her acting, he asked the studio to get her name top billing, above his own. The name of the movie was Roman Holiday, and the talented actress was no less than Audrey Hepburn.
Can I have a silk nightgown with rosebuds on it?
I'm afraid you'll have to rough it tonight. In these.
Pajamas.
Sorry, honey, but I haven't worn a nightgown in years.
Of course, I looked for the movie poster online and the studio did not grant his wish. But she got an Oscar, so... Now, back to Gregory Peck. For a man to ask this, back in those days, says a lot about him. This coupled with the fact that he refused to talk about his romantic partners in interviews. He was a progressist, anti-gun, anti-nuclear weapon. I would say he was the official good guy of Hollywood, the Keanu Reeves of the 50s. And now that I know he rests at the LA Cathedral, I won't look at it the same way anymore. Although apparently, it's not the most surprising fact about this church.
And they also have a chapel which they call the St. Vibiana Chapel, and it has a sarcophagus with the remains of St. Vibiana because the original cathedral in Los Angeles, which the structure is still there on 2nd and Main Street, but it is an entertainment venue now called Vibiana. It was decommissioned as a church many years ago. When this was built, they used to have the remains of St. Vibiana there. I went to school there as a child, so that was my grammar school, my elementary school, and I'm glad they finally buried her in a sarcophagus because she was sort of on display and it was just a little strange. Yes. She was an Italian martyr from, I don't know what century, but when they built the original cathedral in the 1800s, the then Archbishop of Los Angeles apparently went to Rome, to the catacombs, and explored all this to bring the remains of some martyred saint to name the cathedral at that time.
Who knew an Italian martyr is buried in Los Angeles? This city feels so modern and new, we tend to forget that it has a past and many stories, of which Rosalinda knows a fair share. And since our tour of the Music Center is not over yet, let's hear more of what made her choose this spot in particular.
I just love this place. Again, I saw it be built, and I have had, like I said, I've seen many shows here. What I am involved in my career has allowed me to also work on shows that have been produced here. So that's kind of interesting. So I've been involved not only in seeing shows here, but in the behind the scenes and working on shows opening nights are fantastic, and because you have that thrill of if you've worked on something especially, and how's the audience going to react to it. So it's always interesting to watch people on opening night. And even if I work on something, if it's especially a moving story, I've found myself caught up and gotten emotional as well.
As I listened to Rosalinda speak about the music center, it dawned on me that it holds a special significance for her, beyond just being a part of the city that she has seen appear over the years. It is deeply intertwined with her career, her identity as a proud Angeleno, a city her parents chose to call home many years ago. And like a lot of family stories here, the reason her parents initially came is the beautiful weather of California.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that my parents chose LA as their home. My father was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, and my mother was born and raised in Sonora, Mexico, which is the northernmost state. It borders Arizona. So my mother was Mexican born, my father was American born. So I also got the best of both worlds in terms of having a parent born and raised in the United States and a parent born and raised in another country. My parents have lived in the same place, or someone of my family, for 67 years. So I live in an older neighborhood, which is one of the last neighborhoods in downtown, which we still try to maintain so that it doesn't get destroyed. But the developers have been, we can try going down the stairs.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm fine. They've tried to, tear them down, but we are fighting. We also, where I live, and that's a whole nother story, and if you ever want to come, we'll give you a tour. We live on an old oil field because a lot of this area, this was considered the Los Angeles oil field, which was at one time the third largest oil field in the country. And it produced about 6% of the world's oil. Back in the late 1800s and into the 20th century, really. I think the last oil wells, in terms of actual drilling and all that, were decommissioned in the 60s. However, there are still privately owned wells in my neighborhood.
Living in a place where oil was and still is being extracted is not without consequences, as Rosalinda confirmed while we were making our way down to Grand Central Park.
As well. But it does make for a lot of issues, especially health issues with residents living in areas like that. So cancer, a lot of breathing issues like COPD and asthma.
What is COPD?
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is very, very severe in some people. Emphysema, just a lot. I'm sure there's other health issues they haven't even figured out, but breathing toxic gases produced by wells that are not capped properly is very, very dangerous. So it poses a health hazard to the community, and it is a highly populated community.
Did it affect you?
I personally have asthma, yeah. No one in my family ever did. I'm the only one. But again, I'm the only one that was born and raised there. I did have, one of my parents died of cancer, and we have no history of cancer. So they have not ever explored. We are aware, in other words, of the health hazards, but it's never been explored fully. But it's like a lot of the things that we've seen with issues with contaminated water in other areas. Someday somebody's going to figure it out, and there will be a class action lawsuit that is part of my activism, because I am a community activist and representative, and along with some of my neighbors. And we are quite involved in that and have brought attention to it with some of the political, state, county, and city leaders.
I just wanted to add a couple of pieces of information on this. The particular oil field that Rosalinda mentions includes not just downtown, but also Echo Park, Dodger Stadium, and Koreatown, where there are around 800 orphan wells underground. They were just abandoned a few decades ago by the companies who used to drill oil from them. But it's not just these neighborhoods. In the entire Los Angeles area, there are over 5,000 wells, some of them still active. Each of them potentially releases hydrocarbons, including hydrogen sulfate and methane, at levels that could be explosive, as we now know for sure. There was a massive explosion in 1985 caused by methane seeping from beneath the ground. It caused a fire that burned for several days in the Fairfax district, destroying houses of people who had never been informed about the risks their properties and themselves were exposed to. After that, investigative research revealed that the Los Angeles City oil field had at least 9 schools and 3 hospitals located on top of it. And many people are clueless about this, and those who know tend to look away. After all, Los Angeles is one of the most populous cities in the world, and the housing market is as tight as it is lucrative, especially the Echo Park, Dodger Stadium, and Koreatown parts, which are getting more and more gentrified each day.
Older neighborhoods surrounding the downtown area. And this is why I think they're trying to destroy our neighborhoods, because if they build modern buildings, then it doesn't apply, and they could charge as much rent as they want, and then the city gets more taxes and the property owner makes more money. So, but
Los Angeles will become less and less affordable.
Exactly. So it's a vicious cycle. And some of the older buildings, like even the one that I live in, which is not a huge building, there's only 4 units, the property is what is worth money. It's not so much the buildings. It's, they're all well over $1 million, if not over $2 million. But it is very difficult to build especially in my area, because of the old oil wells, because there are laws in place that they have to first clean up the oil wells and cap them, and that is a very, very involved process, because it involves heavy machinery and it can be dangerous.
What you're saying is that it's just easier to do nothing and to let the people who live there, who are now not the richest, not the wealthiest, obviously, get intoxicated and...
Bingo. Yeah, pretty much. So you see why we have a big battle that we fight. Because we should have the right, like anyone else. Just because we are in a low-income area doesn't mean we should be penalized.
Knowing about all of this and the impact it has on Rosalinda's life led me to the question I ask all of my guests, whether or not she thinks that despite of it, she's going to stay in Los Angeles forever.
I do have another place where I would like to live, and I may go there once I retire from working in LA, but that's another story. I was born and raised and still live in one of the most amazing cities in the world. I guess in a way I feel I was born here, I've lived here my whole life, I should die here. So
obviously, Rosalinda is not done with LA. This love story is meant to last. The way I see it, she belongs here in so many ways. Her personality, her creativity, and also because the way she came to be an Angeleno somehow resonates with the story of this place. At least with the very origins of it, which are commemorated in Grand Park on a plaque that Rosalinda holds dear.
7 p.m. Here is the map and the plaque. So this is El Paseo de los Pobladores de Los Angeles, the passage of the founders of Los Angeles, and this is the route of the settlers. And it actually shows a map of where they started in northern Mexico. See, in the state of Sonora, which is where my mother was from, and they crossed a river, the Rio Mayo, the Mayo River, and into Baja California. They made a stop in, what does that say, San Fernando, which is also in Baja, and then from there they went to San Diego, and then from San Diego they stopped at San Gabriel Mission, and then from there they came to Los Angeles. So these were not to be confused with the Franciscan monks that were settling in certain areas and building missions. This was a different expedition. These were los pobladores, the settlers, or the founders, whose mission was the founding of El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de Los Ángeles de Porciúncula. That is the full name of Los Angeles, and Porciúncula was the original name of the Los Angeles River. And of course that is a mouthful, so everybody just narrowed it down to Los Angeles. But this is a very interesting plaque and map because it has a lot of story and a lot of history.
There is something moving about looking back on how a group of people came to this land, a desert, 100 years ago, way before it became the capital of cinema and an ever-changing metropolis that Rosalinda is always happy to see evolve.
There is really nothing not to love. I mean, I guess what I would hate the most is the traffic, so that I think every Angeleno would say that at this point. So, but other than that, there are times I just drive around, especially on a Sunday afternoon, because I want to see. You should visit areas, either walking, driving, whatever, because sometimes you'll miss something, like maybe they've built something new or something new has opened or whatnot. In LA, things can go up overnight. So it's a 24-hour city.
And that's a wrap of this episode of LA Portraits. Remember, if you want to support the show and get access to some pretty awesome bonuses, head to the Patreon of LA Portraits. You can also just treat yourself with some merch on the Buy Me a Coffee page of the show. The links to these and to more info on this episode's hot topic are right there in the description. For questions and comments, reach out on Facebook or Instagram. And most importantly, don't forget to leave a comment and 5 stars on your favorite podcast platform to help more people know about this show. Stay tuned, I'll be back soon.